Okay, good evening, everybody. We are going to start now. This is episode 6 of our shir series on the debates between Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania and the Athenian sages. We've discussed some pretty important fundamental ideas until now, and it doesn't get any less fundamental tonight. So just to give a little bit of a format of what we're going to do tonight, kind of give the schedule of events here. We're going to discuss 3 of the tests. The first 2 are really I'm not going to go so deep into. The first 2 I discussed, I'm just going to give a little bit of a cursory explanation, just a very brief explanation, a little bit of an insight, and then we're going to spend the majority of the time on the 3rd one, which is what we will again spend the majority of the time on. So beginning now. So again, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania is dealing with these Athenian sages. We're getting closer and closer towards the end of this debate. And they ask him another question. They say to him, he says, Eslan bira bedavra. We have a well like a watering well, out in the field. Ayle lamasa, bring it to the city. Again, just to review, anyone who's new joining us, or anyone who forgot in the 2 weeks since last time, we are dealing with the debates of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania and the Athenian sages. Right now, he came all the way to Athens to debate them at the order of the Caesar. And initially, this question's made a little bit more sense, but now it seems like it's a battle of wits and back and forth, and they keep coming up with these almost nonsensical arguments. But we learn that nothing is nonsensical; everything really has a meaning. So again, the argument is, the debate is like this. The debate is as follows. Eslan bira bedavra. We have a well out in the field. Go and get it. Ayla lamasa, bring it to the town. Okay, obviously you can tell, as you know, certainly there has to be some sort of metaphor here, because a well, by definition, is dug into the ground, right? It's set. You can't move a well. So what are they asking when they say, dig us this well and bring it to the town? Amalu, he says to them, he responds back to them, spin me ropes out of bran, and I'll bring it into you. Okay, so the Gemara says, no, so that's the end of it. Okay, so they say, there's a well out in the city, bring it to us. He says to them, okay, I'll do it. Bring me ropes out of bran, and I'll bring it to you. That's the end of the debate. Okay, what on earth is going on there? So again, just very briefly, we're not going to focus on this one so much, but very briefly, the Vilna Gaon and the Maharsha as well point out that the idea in general, that we know that the well in Jewish teachings usually represent an idea of, when we talk about wisdom, when we talk about spiritual influence, we talk about drawing water. We know that every year in Yerushalayim on Sukkot, they would have the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, which is where they would go to the Beis HaMikdash and be a big party with juggling and fire and all that crazy stuff. But from that simcha, from that joy, it wasn't just craziness for the sake of craziness. From that joy, they would be sho'avin. Sho'eva means to draw. They would draw water and pour it on the Mizbeach at that event. But we say misham sho'avin ruach hakodesh. Through that, they would draw divine spirit from that event. So the well and the water is usually an idea of drawing, spirituality, drawing knowledge from the well. So what the Maharsha and the Vilna Gaon explain is what they were saying to him was, and again, I'll give 2 different versions of this, but the Maharsha's point is that they're saying to him, the well, your well that you had, your Ruach HaKodesh, sure, you had it, but that was, again, as we've seen in previous times, that was when, the Beis HaMikdash stood. That was when there was, the Kohanim, and that's when you had the Simchas Beis HaShoeva. But now, your well's out in the field. We have a well also in the field. Bring that to your town. Forget your wisdom. Your wisdom's out in the field. Your wisdom's out there. There's nothing to do. Can't use it. Bring it in. Similarly, the Vilna Gaon points out, on a similar note, that what they were saying to him was, again, that under the influence of the nations, the Jewish well has been, in a sense, perverted, has been influenced, has been mingled with the wells of the other nations, of the other wisdoms. So again, maybe it's time, similar to what we said about the salt, maybe it's time to refine Judaism. Maybe you should leave your well out in the field and bring our well in. Which she said to them, okay, if you bring me out ropes of bran, then I'll bring it in. And again, the Vilna Gaon explains that what that means is the idea being that ropes of bran is a very weak material. It's not it doesn't stick together. And what he was saying to them, basically the message of the Athenians was, again, your time is over. If you believe that you are the chosen people, that your wisdom is the chosen wisdom, you should be able to bring your well back in. Why is it that your well stuck out in the field? Maybe you should just leave your whole thing and join our well. To which he said to them, no, the reason why we can't bring the well into us right now is not because it's incorrect, and it's not because it's not relevant to us, it's because of our own shortcomings. It's because right now we are ropes of bran. Again, the idea being, in a sense, it sounds a little bit, dismal, but in reality, it's not. It's almost empowering to tell us that what the Maharsha and the Vilna Gaon are teaching us is an empowering point, that the well is out there. The spirituality is out there. If we are willing to put in the effort, instead of coming at it with ropes of bran, we come at it with ropes of iron, then we have the ability as well to come back and pull that water, pull that drawing back into our lives. Okay, that's that test. The next test was, again, forgive me for rushing. I want to speak more about the third test, and I want to be able to spend the proper time on that. So the next test was Eislan Recha de Tvira Chaite. We have a mill that is broken. A millstone. So stitch, like so, the millstone to fix it. Again, what are they saying to him? What does that mean? He says to them, Amar kruchi li mine gardi va'aychaite. Twist me threads of stone, and I will use them to stitch it. Again, the idea here being it's another shot at the Jewish people. It's another shtach, as it were, to say that, the Gemara in Chagiga teaches us that when the Jewish people are serving Hashem properly, so there is a millstone in one of the levels of the rakia, one of the levels of the firmament. There's a millstone that grinds mun, again, the heavenly food that they ate in the desert. It grinds mun for the tzaddikim, for the righteous. And what they were saying to us, your millstone's broken and you have no way to fix it. You sew it back together if you think you really can. And what he says to them was, yes, give me the threads of stone, meaning the millstone was made of stone. Give me the threads of stone, and I will stitch it together. And the Vilna Gaon again explains that what's going on here is, generally speaking, when you have to fix something that is broken, when you have to mend a garment, so where do you get the thread to mend the garment? Well, if you want it to be a match, you have to get it from the garment itself. You have to use the garment itself. So what Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah was teaching them when he says, twist me threads of stone and I will use it to stitch it, he was saying to them that, again, a similar idea, that, yeah, we can do it. If we have the kalim, we have the tools, namely we engage ourselves with the Torah, namely the wellstone that was, the millstone that was broken. It broke because we let it break, right? Our relationship with Hashem was loosened when we went into Galus. But if we could take those same stones and bring them back together and use that as the thread, then we too will be able to bring it back together. Again, the idea, I believe, again, at least the way we're presenting it tonight, is of these two tests were, in a sense, what the Athenians were showing Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah is, look, your relationship with Hashem is weakened, Hashem left you, and there's nothing left. Just join our ways, right? Take from our well. Don't worry about your well. Don't worry about your millstone. Take from our millstone. And the response both times was, you're right, the relationship has been sullied a little bit. But if we are willing to double down on our efforts, and we are willing to put in the hard work to make sure we're going to re-sow that well, with the stones themselves, with the Torah itself, we're going to take, no, we don't want the impure water. We want the pure water of our own wells. Then we'll be able to do that as well and bring our own well back into the town, and similarly to recreate our own millstone. Okay, again, we weren't going to go so much into depth in those anyway. But what I really want to speak about now, for the remainder of our time tonight, is the next one. Here we go. Meishara, again, it's interesting. The art scroll, how they give the little notes before they give to tell you what's going on in the Gemara, so that you get the context. So the way they put it is more absurd questions. Again, we see, yes, the questions on the surface seem absurd, but when we delve into it, they're not absurd at all. So here he goes. Meishara de sakina b'mai katle. So if you have a row of knives that grow in a field, so again, imagine a field, and instead of instead of vegetables, you have knives that are growing out of the ground. So you have a row of knives going out of the ground. But my cutlay, with what can they be reaped? Now, obviously, you can't reap them with a knife because you can't reap a knife with a knife. If you have corn, so you could reap it with a scythe, right? There are things that you could use to reap vegetables, but how does one reap a field of knives? Right? What tool or material is going to be sharp enough to cut through the knives, to shear them? So Yehoshua ben Hanani replies, "Bekarne dechamra," with the horn of a donkey. The horn of a donkey. Again, we've come back to donkeys. We've spoken about donkeys in the past already. Donkeys seem to be our animal. I don't think it's such a coincidence, namely because we're learning Maseches Bechoros, which deals with the Pidyon Peter Chamor. Could be that's why this is here in the first place. Who knows? But anyway, he says with the horn of a donkey, to which they respond, which I hope many of you are thinking. Has anyone here ever seen a donkey? So they say to him, "Umi ika karna lachamra." Does a donkey have a horn? No, right? So he says to them, "Umi ika meishara desakina." Can there be a row of knives growing out of the ground? Right? Again, it's an argument. His argument when he brought up the point of the donkey's horn. So the Mefarshim already point out that if you would have stopped the Gemara there, you would have thought, okay, he was answering their question. But what was their question? Their question was, how does one harvest a row of knives from a field? Oh, you use the horn of a donkey, obviously. So no. So the Mefarshim explained already that he had no intention. He knew that when he said that, he was goading them on. By saying that, he knew they were going to say back to him, there is no horn of a donkey, to which he could respond, well, there's also no field of knives. Okay, that's a cute little back and forth, but what on earth does it mean? What is going on? Again, our classic structure here, what is the deeper understanding? So this one, part of the reason why I spent very little time on the first two is because I spent a lot of time on this one, because it's a very, very important topic. It's a very, very relevant topic, and it's one that really impacts our daily lives, our communal lives, our planet Earth lives. It's a very, very important idea. And it goes as follows. This is going to be based on the works on the Maharal. We're going to see that it's not the Maharal alone. So here we go. As you can imagine, this discussion really was not about knives or donkeys or horns. But what is really going on here? We believe, again, whatever level you want to believe this, again, it's a dispute amongst the Rishonim and the Bali Machshava, the masters of Jewish thought, that God runs the world with hashgacha. Right? God, we believe in, whether it's hashgacha pratis for individuals, specific supervision in a sense, or whether it's hashgacha klalis, a more general type of idea that Hashem guards the world. Again, there are some Rishonim, the Rambam, for example, explains that we don't necessarily all have hashgacha pratis. Some people do, if you're really, really righteous. Others, it's more of a general hashgacha, a general watching over in a sense. But we believe that on some level there is hashgacha. We don't believe that the world is chaos. We don't believe in chaos. We don't believe, again, there was tohu vavohu, right? Nothingness before the world was created. But we believe, even if you want to believe in science, I don't even believe in science. We all believe in science. But I mean, it's even if you want to, go with a much more, you're not necessarily what they call a creationist in the literal sense. We believe. Again, the Ramban already points out that what we read in Sefer Bereshis is just something that we can understand with our ears, but there's something much, much deeper going on. And a proof to that is that, we say Vayi'er Vayivoker Yom Rishon, Yom Echad. So it was day, it was night, day one. Let me ask you this. What determines day and night? So the rotation of the earth, right? And the year is around the sun, meaning it's based on the sun and the moon and the like. Okay, on day one, there was no sun yet, right? The sun was only created day 4. So clearly it says, the Ramban already tells us days were much longer than days, right? Than our days. So again, we understand, we don't really fully understand what what creation means. We have the text that we use and we darshan, that we understand, that we use it as a basic level as building blocks, but it's not necessarily exactly how it happened, right? So the question is, not the question, the point is that we don't believe in chaos though. We believe that even within the natural order of things, Hashem created a system. And that system is where we live. The Greeks, on the other hand, the Athenians, their point was that no, there's no hashgacha, there's no, it's chaos, it's random. I think that's really very much emphasized. Again, if you read Greek mythology, you see that, again, their gods, lowercase g, obviously, were part of daily life in a sense of like they used to interact with the humans regularly, right? You would see, Zeus would take women as his brides and stuff like that. And there were, it was like, it's a much more, it's not that the gods are necessarily, omnipotent and sitting over everything, but they were part, again, because they didn't believe that there was one central figure controlling. Rather, it was chaos. Everything kind of went as it did. So they say to him like this: the field of knives represents things in the world that hurt us and cause us pain. Right? Knives are sharp. You can imagine knives cause us, a sharp object growing out of the ground causes pain. By saying that knives are growing out of the ground, what he was saying was that there are things introduced into this world that are sharp and painful and cause harm and destruction. And the question they were asking was, why does the world grow countless things that cause pain and destruction in our lives? Meaning, there's a deeper question to that, because again, if you remember what we said, they know what we believe. That we believe that there is no haphazard, growth in this world, but rather everything is orchestrated by Hashem. In a sense, why would Hashem allow these things to exist in our world? Why if Hashem wants to give us good, why would Hashem want to cause these things to exist in the world? And this question is particularly bothersome when it comes to the question of righteous people, a righteous person who is undeserving of this pain and this suffering. So what they were claiming was, although there is some order to you want to claim that there's order to this world, well, it must be that your God has forsaken you. If so much bad has happened, either your God is evil, right? Or your God has forsaken you. Take your pick, right? Because really this world clearly just rests on chaos and chance. And if you don't want to say it's chaos and chance, well, then you bring up to one of the most complicated and difficult, both from theologically and emotionally, the challenge, what's called tzaddik viralo, right? The righteous that suffers. Why do the famous question, quote unquote, why do bad things happen to good people? In a sense, and I use this pun, the Athenians were opening, quote, the pun intended, the Pandora's box, right, of this question of tzaddik viralo. How can good things happen? How could bad things happen to good people? Good things happen to bad people. If your God is with you and is just and it has hashgacha pratis or hashgacha klaus, some sort of hashgacha, how could bad things happen to good people? That was the question they were really asking. How could anyone chop down these knives, in a sense? What can you do to avoid them? They're in this world. But at a deeper level, the question is that if your God is orchestrating the world, either he's evil or the world is run by chaos, your God has forsaken you, or chas v'shalom, even worse, there was no God that ever orchestrated these events in the first place. That was the question they were posing to him. Now you can imagine, if you were Yehoshua ben Hanania, you'd start to sweat on the collar a little bit, because this question is a checkmate. There's no way out of it. What witty thing can you say? Now, we'll see. He does say a witty thing to get out of it. We'll see. But this question has bothered the sages for generations. It's almost an unanswerable question. In fact, Moshe Rabbeinu himself, the closest person to the Ribono Shel Olam, in his relationship, I don't mean in terms of our serving. I mean, his relationship, the closest relationally to Kadosh Baruch Hu, right, had the same question. The Gemara in Brachos Daf Zayin tells us that Moshe asked three things of Hashem, and the third one was, Hashem, explain to me, how could bad things happen to good people? And if it's a challenge for Moshe Rabbeinu, then how can it not be a challenge for everyone else? And we see many, many times in Chazal, in the Navi. The Navi tells us, the Navi in Yirmiyahu, this is in Yirmiyahu, the 12th parak tells us, Madua derech rishayim tzalecha, why do the wicked prosper? Similarly, Habakkuk tells us, Lama tabit bogdim, tacharish bavala, rasha tzadik mimenu, why should you gaze upon the traitors? Be silent when a wicked man swallows up one more righteous than he. Again, all these points are tzaddik v'ralo. How can you allow such bad things to happen to such good people? And then finally, as we learn in Koheles, Shlomo HaMelech writes, Yesh hevel asher nasa al haaretz, asher yesh tzadikim, asher magia alehem k'ma'aseh harishayim, v'yesh rishayim shemagia alehem k'ma'aseh hatzadikim. There is vanity that is done on the earth, and there are righteous men to whom it happens according to the deed of the wicked. So righteous people, the deed of the wicked is given upon the righteous. And there are wicked men who it happens according to the deed of the righteous. And there are wicked people who receive the deed of the righteous. So we see this is not an easy issue to get out of. This should be a checkmate. This should be the end of the debate. How are you going to answer this? And again, many have discussed this issue. Many have discussed it, again, not necessarily in the context of our Gemara, but many have discussed this issue of tzaddik v'ralo. Bad things happening to good people. And it's not easily discussed, both from a theoretical perspective or a rational perspective, but also from an emotional perspective. Again, it's one of the most, again, obviously it's a theological issue. Okay, fine. But I could wrap my mind around it and say, but emotionally, when we hear stories, Rahman al-Islam, of bad things, terrible, horrible things that happen to people who are so undeserving, children who suffer horrible fates, great rabbis, great tzaddikim, men, women who don't deserve these things, and we hear about it, it kills us on the inside. How could that happen? How could that be? A lot of what I'm quoting tonight, I'm just going to share the book here, is a fantastic work written by one of my Rabbeim, Rabbi Nathaniel Wiederblank. It's a couple years old. It's called Illuminating Jewish Thought. Basically, these shirim came out when I was in REITs and I was in yeshiva. So part of the smicha program is a crash course in Jewish thought, in machshava. And he actually, Rabbi Wiederblank, teaches the course. And then after a while, he put all of his information together and he actually came up with 3 of these volumes. I think only one of them is out so far. Here's how thick it is. I think only one of them is out so far, but they're going to be 3. But he talks about this extensively. And in terms of the emotional, difficulty that this brings, he quotes a story from another one of the Rebbeim in YU, Rabbi Shalom Karmi, who tells this story. He says, as a young adult, this is Rabbi Karmi talking, I had the privilege of spending a few hours with an eminent physician scientist, well known as a lay luminary of orthodoxy. He had recently published on Darwinism and religion and similar subjects. No sooner had we been introduced then, as if reading my mind, he exclaimed, "Don't think that I care much about this stuff." Meaning about these types of, Darwin and religion and how they match, how they work out. So I lecture on it because I'm asked to. I publish because there's a demand for me. There's a demand. For me, and again, this is someone who's very, very well versed in the science and in the Torah and both aspects of it. For me, a real religious question is a child dying of leukemia. Rahman al-Islam. Again, this is the idea. Again, it's something that the wisest people, it's very, very difficult to wrap our minds around, to understand what it actually means. And again, to quote Rabbi Wiederblank in the book, he writes, this is not just a philosophical quandary or a scientific enigma. It is the visceral response of seeing injustice, to watching a child wither in pain, to seeing the righteous beaten and the wicked flourish. Right? That's what tzaddik v'ralo is, and that's why it's so difficult. The Ramban, Nachmanides, Moshe ben Nachman, tells us in the beginning in his introduction to Eov, which is again a story of suffering, a story of torment, Job, and he tells us, the Ramban writes, "V'yesh davar machiv halavavos umadiv machshavos." There's one subject that pains the hearts and blurs the mind. Mimenu levado nimshachu kol hadoros l'kfir gemura. And this is the main cause of people leaving the fold, of people leaving their faith. And that is, v'hu haros ba'olam mishpat me'ukal V'tzadik v'ra lo v'rasha v'tov lo. And it's the fact that a perception of an unjust world where the balances are in balance. And that's the shorish ha'meri b'chol ha'mordim mikol omer uma v'lashim. It's the major challenge that all people of faith have to face, have to deal with. And he writes, it pains the heart and distresses the mind. It's very, very difficult. And based on all this, knowing, again, we didn't need me to go through all of that to know the difficulty of the question of why bad things happen to good people. But going back to our story, this should have been a slam dunk. Game over. Rabbi Yehoshua, you made a deal with them that if they can defeat you, you have to give up your life to them. This should have been it. But we know it's not. So what did he respond? So Rabbi Yehoshua responds by telling them, how do you cut down these knives? With the horn of a donkey. Karen hachamor. What? What does that mean? So the Maharal explains in a classic sense that the word chamor, yes, it's referring to it. It means donkey, but chamor is also the letters of chomer. Chomer meaning material, meaning matter, right? Chomer. It's our form, our humanity. Okay, chomer. And what is a keren? A keren's a horn, but we know that the horn doesn't necessarily mean a horn. But what a horn means is, it means the magnificence, the excellence. Right? We learn from the Eskeran David, David Avdech. The Karno Taro Mishuazach. We look for his excellence, his glow, his horn, the horn of an animal. You look at some of these animals, and their horns are the most magnificent thing you've ever seen. Especially the really wild ones, right? Like they're amazing. So what was he saying? How does one knock down this field of knives, through the excellence of matter. The excellence of matter. The highest human form. The elevated human being in his material form. Now, this was a setup. It was a trap. Why? Because we've discussed many, many times already that the Athenians, and this is where we do share a little bit of a similarity with them, that the Athenians, again, we've discussed that there is a focus on the body, but it's not but the Athenian, that's the general populace. When it came to the Athenian sages, we've discussed that they placed the intellect above all else. They placed the intellect above all else, which means that what reigns supreme? Concepts, ideas, knowledge. But when it comes to matter, it withers away like anything else. There is no such thing as the excellence of matter. There is no Karen HaChamor, Karen HaChomer. So how are you going to cut down all these bad things with the Karen HaChomer, the excellence of matter? To which Rabbi Yehoshua responds. And again, this is where it gets a little bit more of a drush than a literal translation, but he says that's right. Just as there's no excellence of matter, there's also no organic field of knives. Meaning what? Hashem, explains the Maharal, we know others explain this too, that Hashem created the world. Why did Hashem need to create the world? So, Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto and the Derech Hashem, the Maharal, others tell us that Hashem created the world to benefit those inhabitants of said world. Hashem created the world to give. In fact, when we say that everyone was created b'tselem Elokim in God's image, it means that we are supposed to mimic God's ways. Just as God created the world to give, we are supposed to be givers. We are supposed to be looking to better the world, like God is looking to better the world, like Hashem is looking to better the world. What Rabbi Yehoshua Hanani was saying was, any suffering that exists in this world is not because of an arbitrary world, and it's not because Hashem's direct punishing of people. Again, there is direct punishing, but we're talking about tzaddikim at least. Not necessarily because of punishment, but rather the evils that exist in this world are engendered by the agency of mankind. They're brought in by man. What do I mean? It means two things. It means that many of the evil things that exist in this world are not from, quote unquote, again, this is a very difficult thing to discuss, but we're going to try it anyway. They're not necessarily from God. Rather, we know that Hashem created the world where every human being has free will, which means that the system dictates that everybody has free will. And if everybody has free will, and that is part of the system, well, then I have the ability, or someone has the ability to cause harm to others, to cause bad things, to bring bad things into the world. Everyone has the ability to do that. It's part of the package of being a human being. And what Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanani was explaining to them was that suffering, again, and we're going to start, this is going to be a little bit of a downer, but don't worry, Mirza Hashem, when we get to the end, it'll be a little bit of an upper. And that is that part of the inevitable cost of being a human being is suffering. It's the system through which the world exists. Because again, free will is part of the world. Being a human means being a human. Again, Hashem created us with physical bodies that unfortunately, as we get older, don't work as well as when we were younger. Or different things that happen to us. I'm just going to read the ArtScroll's explanation of this because it's said very, very well. He says like this. Countered Rabbi Yehoshua, once you grant that matter is inferior, you have done away with the problem of evil. Meaning again, the premise was that evil is organic. It's part of what was put into the world. Your God put it into the world. He says, no, once you realize that matter, we're all just matter, and matter is subject to the rules of nature, in a sense, well then it's not necessarily that evil is coming directly from God. The world sprouts no haphazard growth of knives. Rather, Hashem organizes the cosmos to produce only good. Evils are engendered by the agency of mankind. People can be a harmonious part of the beneficent natural order, but by freely choosing sinful actions, they damage their surroundings, destroy their own inborn integrity, and bring punishment upon themselves. There's a rule in the Gemara that there's no suffering without sin. If it is true, as you insist, that sometimes perfectly guiltless people suffer, their suffering are neither decreed by special providence nor wrought by an amoral cosmos, but are simply among the inevitable costs of life as material bodies. Like all other matter, they are inherently unstable and susceptible to injury and dissolution. Man's immortal soul, however, is excellent indeed. There is the keren of the soul, and offers the man's ultimate escape from the vulnerabilities of the flesh. That's the Maharal's explanation. Again, it's nuanced and it's not so easy to digest. But what he's saying is that evil, call it evil, Ra, is not a direct, God created this, Hashem created the world to give, but by creating a system of human beings, in a sense, it's almost like a cost-benefit analysis. This system, HaKadosh Baruch Hu decreed, was the way to give the most good. And that, by definition, includes, as part of the system, pain, suffering. It's part of the human condition. That is how the Maharal explains this Gemara. And again, he's saying that just like you're saying there is no excellent matter, so too there is no organic field of knives. This idea is not discussed only by the Maharal, but it's already discussed before that by the Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim. The Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim discusses this concept of evil and bad things in the world. And the Rambam writes that there are three types of, he calls it evil, but it means ra, meaning like bad in the world, bad things that happen. Number one is things that come out of being the human condition, meaning our vulnerabilities as human beings to the natural order, right? The fact that there's a hurricane, and a hurricane can cause damage, again, that's part of the natural world that Hashem created, right? Hashem created a world with physics. Hurricanes are created through physics. You have hot air that meets cold air over a body of water. It creates a storm, that creates a hurricane. That's all part of the package that Hashem created as science, right? As physics, as nature, right? Nature isn't something separate from God. Nature is the system through which Hashem runs the world. In fact, that's why, in general, we're not supposed to daven for miracles. Because by davening for a miracle, you're asking Hashem to break his system that he created, right? That's number one. Number two type of evil is that which is imparted by others, right? We know that could be personal, which could be murder, stealing, right? Bad things that people can do to another to cause suffering. But it could also be societal, which is like war. Wars happen also, right? Wars are also quote unquote natural. People have free will to get into wars. But the third one, the Rambam writes, he writes that the third type of ra, the third type of suffering, is the suffering that we inflict upon ourselves. And that could be in two ways. That could be, first of all, again, the Rambam was a doctor, so it could be not taking care of ourselves. The decisions that we make, ultimately, that can cause a decline in our health or to cause whatever decisions we make. Okay, sometimes we choose right, sometimes we choose wrong. But he says more than that, and this is where it takes a turn. And this is where it gets a little bit more empowering. And that is that we have to recognize, again, called the Avid Rahman Latav Avid. All that Hashem does, we have to believe, is for the good. Everything that happens to us in life, we have to believe is for the good. And again, if you think hard enough, it is for the good. Sometimes it's hard to see. None of this is easy, but it's for the good. Again, built into a system that is ultimately for the good. You can have some things that are bad, some things that are not as good. But, says the Rambam, what causes the most suffering, in a sense, and it's a little bit ironic, is our attitude towards the suffering. We double that suffering when something happens, when we look at it with the wrong perspective. I'll read it inside. I'll read it as Rabbi Wiederblein quotes from the Rambam. He writes, this is the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim in the Guide to the Perplexed. He writes, most of the pain and suffering experienced by people stem from the free choices that people make. Or to put it differently, God willed us to live in a material world in which people have free choice. The physicality and freedom necessary for the purpose of our existence to be achieved also demands some level of affliction. However, much of the distress and misery that people experience can be mitigated through contemplation and focusing on spiritual perfection. Thus, our goal must be to improve society. Yes, when we suffer, we look outward. We look at how can we ultimately use what we're given, even if it's not as shiny and bright and happy and good, but how can we improve it so that there will be less pain? Meaning, how can we make sure that when something happens to somebody else, there will be less pain in the world? Or to improve ourselves that we will not experience so much pain. Again, it's an idea of changing one's mindset and working on oneself to realize that there is some sort of plan. And that plan, even if the plan didn't necessarily, include, this I don't call it little. Again, none of this is to ever at all to minimize anyone's situation or I should have said this at the beginning, to minimize anyone's situation or anyone's suffering or anyone's hardships. But it's about perspective, as Rav Soloveitchik tells us in the Sefer Kol Dodi Dofek. He tells us that it's not that the perspective of a Jew when hardship comes is not to ask lama. Lama means why. It's not to ask why, but to change the nikudos and to say lema. Not lama, why, but lema, for what? For what reason did this happen to me? What message can I take from this? What way can I use this experience? And again, sometimes they are so hard. And again, I hope I'm davening right now that nobody is at all thinking that I'm minimizing any of these difficult hardships and situations that can be crushing and can be terrible. But we always do have the choice of how we look at it. And we can ask ourselves, lema, how can I use? Sometimes we hear such inspiring stories from people who are really, really in a situation of suffering, but they use that either to help others who are in those same situation, or to help others in different situations but can relate to them. Again, it takes tremendous strength. The Rambam himself, I'll tell you, the Rambam himself, the one who wrote all this, does talk about in other places in a letter that he wrote when the Rambam's brother died in a horrible boat accident, ship accident. When he was a merchant. He actually supported the Rambam and the whole family. And there was an accident and his boat sunk. and he died. And the Rambam writes that for months, he could not get out of bed. This is the same Rambam that's telling us, again, so the Rambam recognizes the difficulty of this. But the ideal, even though we understand our humanity, we still have to strive for the ideal. And the ideal is that ultimately, we have to look and realize that Hashem is running the show. And that Hashem is doing everything that happens to us is for the good. It's hard to see, but it's there. It's there. Just to conclude, I heard an amazing idea from a very confusing line in part of the davening on Yom Kippur. Thank you so much. On davening on Yom Kippur and on Tisha B'av, and that is when we daven on Yom Kippur and Tisha B'av, one of the tefillas that those 2 days have in common is what's called the Asara Haruge Malchus, the 10 martyrs. Right, the story of the Roman emperor, again, ironic that we're talking about the Roman emperor, but the Roman emperor who gathered up the 10 sages. Again, now if you look at the sages, clearly they didn't live in the same generation, so it's allegorical. But again, the idea that he gathered up the 10 sages and he tried them in a sense in a mock trial for punishing the brothers of Yosef for selling Yosef. And he says, okay, so you're all guilty, and you're going to pay the brothers never got punished. You're going to pay the price. And at one point during the piyut goes through their deaths in a gruesome, horrific, graphic way. And at one point during this whole thing, the angels cry out, and the angels say, Sarfe malat saku b'mara zo Torah v'zo schora, zu Torah v'zo schora. The seraphim, the angels above, cried out bitterly. This is the Torah and this is its reward. These are the luminaries of the generation. How could you allow this, Hashem? You're cloaked in light. How can you do such horrible things to these people? What did they deserve? There's no tzaddik v'ralo greater than this. And especially the claim they're being punished for the brothers of Yosef. What connection? Mechayv Magadev al Divrei Torah, this vile, terrible person who blasphemes the Torah, he's punishing them. Unsa Baskel Mishamayim. A divine voice responded to the angels and said, Im Eshma Kol Acher, Efoch Es HaOlam Lamayim. L'tov Avo Ashis Hadomayim. If I hear another sound, it's like when the kids are like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And the father, if I hear another sound, what's going on? If I hear another sound, I'm going to turn the world into water. I will go back to Tohu Vavohu. I will destroy everything. It's a decree from before my presence. Accept it. You delight in the law that existed before time. Meaning, you angels accept my decree. But the question is, what? Why the angels are trying to defend Hashem, and Hashem turns back to them and says, if you don't stop, I'm going to destroy the whole world. Okay, it's a little bit unfair, a little bit rash. You could say it, about Hashem, what is going on? So I once heard an amazing explanation from Rabbi Ephraim Waxman. And he explains as follows. What Hashem wasn't reacting in a fit of rage to the angels. What Hashem was telling them was, the only way you can possibly understand why this suffering is going on to these great tzaddikim, is if I were to undo the entire world and to show you the DNA and the grand plan of what the world is supposed to bring out. That's the only way you could understand. I will have to destroy the entire world. Short of that, you won't understand. You can't understand because it's part of the ultimate divine plan. That's what he was telling to the angels. You want to understand? You'd have to go all the way back to before the world was created, into the very DNA of existence, to understand why this is ultimately going to be good somehow. Something we can't do. But again, as Rav Soloveitchik pointed out, our job isn't to ask lama, why, but lema. We might not know the plan. We might not know why it's happening, but we are empowered to try to make the best of it. Again, we're human beings. We deal with it in the best way we can. But we strive to see the good and ultimately to make it better for others. That's the idea of tzaddik v'ralo. That's the confusion, the visceral, difficult tzaddik v'ralo, which we will never understand, but explained to Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, we won't understand it because we're just human beings. It's our very nature. Yes, there is no excellence of matter. There's also no organic evil that Hashem just puts in the world. But it's all about our perspective. So we should be zoche, again, especially, I didn't, with all the craziness going on in the world, I'll be honest, I didn't time this year necessarily with the timing of all the craziness going on in the world, but there's a lot of darkness in the world right now. There's a lot of craziness in the world right now. Things we don't understand how, what's going to be next. Hopefully nothing. But with all this craziness going around, we can't ask lama. We can't ask why is this happening. All each and every one of us can ask is lema. For what? What can we do? What can I do to be marbek kvod shamayim, to increase Hashem's glory on this world? And again, that's a question that everyone's going to have to look internally and answer. What can I do to be better? What can I do to make the world better? And that is the Torah's reaction. That is Rabbi Shua ben Chananya's reaction to the great question of tzaddik v'ralo, of why bad things happen to good people. The answer is we don't know. But what can we do to make it better? Okay, we'll hold here for tonight.
Thank you, Rabbi.